Hi folks. Well, this is yet one more video about Pioneer Yeast or sourdough starter. And this time I'm going to make a loaf of bread with it. Now, I've been postponing making bread with it because it's been hot and I didn't want to have the oven on inside the house when it's been so hot. But it's cooling down. Now that it's getting towards the end of summer, it cools down in this area. And so I'm going to make some sourdough bread with this. Now, I have already made bread with it, but I made pita bread. And I made a video about it, but I didn't like that video, so I didn't put it up. Anyway, I just fed this sourdough starter, and I put a line there so you can see that it's going to double or even more than double. This is a very active sourdough starter, so it should be having no problems letting it double. And I put that line there for reference, and we're going to wait an hour or two and see what happens. It's an hour later now, and I just wanted to show you that it's rising. I moved the camera in order to make it more visible, but just in case you can't see it, it's risen up to about here. So it's not quite double yet. I'm going to let it go for another hour, and then I'll get back to it again. Here it's been 2 hours that my Pioneer Yeast, my sourdough starter, has been expanding, and it's more than doubled, and it probably will go a little bit further, but I'm going to go ahead and start the recipe now. So here I've knocked the air bubbles out, and I'm going to take 2 1/3 cups of this starter, and I'm going to put it in this glass bowl. Now, this recipe really couldn't be much easier. So in here we have 2 1/3 cups of the sourdough starter. This is 1 tablespoon of salt. That's not iodized salt, that's just plain salt. We got 3 1/3 cups of what I have in here is unbleached bread flour. You absolutely want to use unbleached flour for doing this. It could be whole wheat flour. And then this is 1 cup of room temperature water. You do want to use cool water when you're doing this. You don't want it to be warm. So that's room temperature water. And now I'm going to mix this up. That 1 cup of water is more or less. You may need to add a little bit more water because it all depends on how much water was in your sourdough starter, in your Pioneer Yeast, because it could be more or less. So that will also make your water that you're adding to the bread recipe more or less as well. So I'm going to have to add a little bit more. This is 1/3 of a cup. And I think that'll be enough. If it isn't, I'll tell you. 1 1/3 cups of water wasn't enough, so I added enough water to make it roughly 1 1/2 cups. And now my dough is ready to be kneaded. Now, this dough is going to need to be kneaded for about 20 minutes, and that's quite a long time. But that's what everybody says that you need to do, and that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to just put flour in my hands to get started with, even though I have no doubt that this dough is going to stick to my fingers, but I'll start out this way anyway. And we'll take it out, and we're going to knead this. So this is going to be kneaded for 20 minutes. That's a long time, but that's what needs to be done. Well, I've kneaded this now for 20 minutes, and I'm gonna use loaf pans for mine. You don't have to do that. You can just form this into 1 or 2 or even 4 bowls, I guess, and make what they call artisan loaves, just by forming them into a ball and putting them on a baking sheet and baking them that way. But I'm going to use loaf pans because I just want to. And I've lubricated these 2 loaf pans with coconut oil. I'm going to cut this in half. And I'm going to form 2 oblong shapes that will more or less fit into those pans, those baking pans. So here's one. I'll put it in here, and the other one I'll put into this glass one. I like using the glass more than a metal one, but I only have one glass one. I suppose I ought to get another glass one since I like using them. But we have one, so that'll do for now. Anyway, this has to be covered up with a towel, a clean towel. And left to sit for quite a long time. It might take a minimum. It'll take a minimum of 2 hours for this to rise the way we want it to. More likely, it'll take 5 hours, or it even could take 8 hours. So that's the problem with this kind of bread, is it does take quite a long time to rise. But it's an important step, and you can't neglect it. So we'll be back in a while, and we'll check on the progress of this. Just wanted to give a quick look at what it looks like after a couple hours. Now this still needs to rise a little bit more. I'm going to give it probably another hour and a half, I'd say, at least. But it's all coming together here. It won't be much longer before I put this in the oven. Here are 2 unbaked loaves of sourdough bread after about 5.5 hours, and they might rise a little bit more if I leave them, but I'm going to go ahead and just put them in the oven, and hopefully we're going to have delicious sourdough bread. Now, the cooking time for these, it's 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And then you want to cook it, you want to bake it for between 30 minutes and 1 hour, depending on how big your loaf is. And I have 2 small loaves here, so I'm going to put them in there for 40 minutes. And I think that'll be good. So here are our 2 fresh loaves of sourdough bread, fresh out of the oven. I took them out just 1 minute ago, not even. And they need to come out of these baking pans, these loaf pans, and get cooled on this rack that I've got here. And here are our 2 loaves cooling on this rack. They'll have to cool for a while before I cut into them, but they're a thing of beauty. They really are. So next we'll give it a taste. We'll cut some open and give it a taste. So we're going to cut it and see what it looks like. And there we have it. Now, it doesn't have as big of bubbles as I've seen in other bread, but it looks good. And next we're going to give it a taste. Okay, now Janine is going to taste it. So she's going to taste some of it and tell us what she thinks. Is it good? So there you have it. She likes it. I've tasted it. It's good. So that's making bread with nothing more than wheat and a little salt. If you have wheat and you can grind it up, you have water and you have a little salt and a way to cook it, you can make bread. That's about it. So thanks for watching.